Okay, this one made it, and I really had to think about this one because it is another one where the subject does not survive. Um, and there is an incident in this book that I've already said where the situation with Dario reached a point where Lewis quite literally thought that he might lose him, like a straight full-on panic attack, um, trying to get in contact with Dario. Um, and I have a few poems where, the subject of the poem doesn't survive. But this one speaks directly to that incident, while also taking it from a Dario perspective of trying to be more than he is, and that leading to the ultimate but not desired end goal, which happens in this poem. And I think that's a great fear for all of the characters that care about Dario in the book, that it might happen. And Lubis, unfortunately, was the only one, other than Kevin, I think, to. Well, Kevin's was not as bad, and it's off page, but Lewis's one is not off page. It's there. They're sitting on the beach. They're really in it. And he was so lost. Like, not Dario. Lewis was so lost. And I really contemplated putting it in here because it absolutely could be triggering. But since this is the only book that this topic quite literally lives in, here it is. So, separation. I am a leaf on a fruitless tree, yearning to be more than I can be, knowing that if I leave my branch, I will die, that my roots have determined my barren life, a species that will be fruitless no matter how hard I try to grow into something more appealing to the eye. But still I try. Yes, I try, until I fall to the ground and leave my branch behind. I was a leaf on a fruitless tree, now separated from pain am I. Yeah, the same way I took the flower in the other one to talk about being drained of your life's worth, your life source, so that someone else can prosper. Selfishly, this one came from a basic idea. It must have been fall, and I was just thinking about leaves falling from trees and how can I work with that? And if I do talk about a leaf, when a leaf falls from the tree, it eventually dies. Some trees bear fruit, but some don't. And so I've got all these ideas in my head, and I'm saying, so if you're in a certain state emotionally, how would you handle this? I'm a leaf on a fruitless tree. So for Dario, that's a thing because that's exactly what he is. He is a leaf on a fruitless tree. He has never, ever, no matter what he does, the tree that he is a part of is not designed to grow fruit, which is not a bad thing. Fruitless trees are beautiful, which is the second problem for him, is that he doesn't realize that he doesn't need to flower or grow some variation of a fruit to be beautiful. And so that's his issue. And the next line speaks to that, yearning to be more than I can be, but also realizing if you leave the tree, what you're trying to be essentially will be destroyed, but you can't be what you want to be if you stay unless you embrace that you're a fruitless tree. And that is the problem here. And it's stated in the next line that my roots have determined my barren life. They absolutely have. You are a fruitless tree. The roots that have been planted, that you are growing from, they are not a fruit tree. The tree that you are is fine, and embracing that would be great so you can blossom into an even bigger and more grand and more beautiful, plant. But unfortunately, what you desire is fruit, and hence you keep trying to, be this thing. And that's why it goes, no matter how hard I try, to grow into something more appealing to the eye, because in Dario's mind, he is just not worthy of anything because he doesn't look like the thing that he's trying to look like. And that's why I used him wearing contacts, brown contacts, to cover up his blue eyes. That's a very subtle thing to be, that he doesn't like the eyes that he looks through life being on him. And he thinks that everything about him looks in a way that is undesirable, of love or friendship, of anything. And that's pretty much how he goes through life. So yeah, it's that's where it's going from. And then, like I said at the beginning, if you're talking about leaves when they fall to the ground, that is the end of their cycle. And unfortunately for the author for the subject in this poem, they do not embrace the tree that they are, and they just kind of fall naturally with the tide, with the time, and they leave as one of those leaves, because all of the other leaves on the tree don't matter to them. The fact that the tree is still in the ground, and if they focus more on being the tree and not just a leaf, they'd still be there. They'd still be rooted. They'd still be growing, and new leaves would grow because they would embrace themselves as a tree and not just a singular part that is the leaf. And so when the leaf falls, that's what happens. So sadly, they don't survive on this section of writing. But unfortunately, for Lewis, mostly, not necessarily Dario. Dario does. But it's a very intense section, and it was one of the sections that made me cry because, plot spoiler, he goes home and he talks to his partner, because they're not married yet, because she's like, nah, we're not doing that. And he's like, okay with it, but brings it up every now and then as a joke, like he could finally convince her. He knows it's never going to happen, but they're okay with that. It's just a personal running up joke between them. And he tells her, and when I was listening to the narrator portray this, oh man, it was heavy. I had to stop listening. I was not prepared, because Lewis really feels for Dario, and having to deal with what this poem describes in a very real life situation, and not being able to know if it happened, and then finally realizing it did indeed not happen, and rushing over to do whatever they could to, hear Dario out and understand him and help him. The emotion didn't leave him. He went back home, well into the early morning. His children were even up because of the way he bolted out of the house to go get Dario. Meet him at his house, and then he took him back home, to his own house, and then drove back. It was heavy, and I was not ready. That's the only way to explain it. Reading it was one thing, but just like I didn't know what I had with the poem previously, I knew it was there this time, in all fairness, but I didn't know how well it was there, and how effective it could be to anybody who relates to those types of things, depression, anxiety. and a big heap of neurodivergence. Here we are. And so it played out a lot better than I expected, which is a good thing. Had me feel all the feels. So that's why it's here, specifically because Lewis had to deal with it. And nobody else in the book really had to deal with this particular situation. They didn't even know until I think Dario tells one of them, Kevin, what had happened. So it was definitely a Lewis only situation until Dario started to come into his own in his final year of high school. So, yeah, heavy, but teenagers don't live in a bubble. They definitely don't. And sometimes they suffer in silence. And it would be nice if every Dario had a Lewis. But that's just not realistic. That's just not how life happens. It's unfortunate. But at least for Dario, he did have a Lewis. And, he helped him through even when it was hard. Even when Dario didn't want to talk to him, but was still physically there in the same space. Even when Dario does stop talking to him, he still messages him and still shows up to like church functions, events, and other things where he may be singing during that whole time from January on until when the new year started. He still showed up. He still supported. He still sent text messages, even though Dario ignored every single one. He never gave up. And it's admirable that he cared that much about Dario. So that's why separation is here. And I really did think about it. But it speaks to Lewis very heavily and his understanding of the mental state that Dario is in, and that they both shared this experience together and came out on the other side all right, because it doesn't always work out that well. But it did. So yeah. If you've made it this far, before I get too into this one, as per usual, thanks for stopping by.